Hello, this is Never Heard of It podcast. I'm Shawn, and I am joined by my co-host,
Craig Moorhead. That's me. And this is the podcast where we talk about the movies that have fallen through our cracks.
That's right, and it's just us talking this time. We've had some awesome guests on. I hope you've been listening to those. And if not, I hope you've been checking out the mini episodes, because those don't require a lot of thoughts or involvement. And I got a message today from somebody who was really psyched about that Big Lebowski spinoff. So if you're listening to this and you have no idea what we're talking about, you need to go back and listen to that episode.
Yeah, definitely. You need to listen to these all in order. Otherwise, you know, the whole universe that we're building, you'll be left out.
Right, yeah. When we get to that crazy twist ending, man, it's not going to make sense unless you've been listening.
That's right. That is right.
Craig, how are you?
I'm doing all right, Shawn. How are you?
I'm good. I'm interested and excited to talk about this movie here.
Yeah, you kind of found a little weird gem here.
Yeah, I did. Now, we didn't pick this one on air, so to speak, because of the guests that we've had. So I just randomly was looking on Amazon and was like, Craig, here's some movies. And this is what we went with. We went with a movie from 1973 called Nothing But the Night. And this is a movie that is directed by, Peter Sasdy. It is written by Brian Hales from a novel by John Blackburn. And here's why I picked it, is because it stars Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing. It also stars Diana Dors, Georgia Brown, Keith Barron, who was a little girl here. She's way down here. What happened on the IMDb? No, she's not. Gwyneth Strong is young Mary Valley. And then a couple other people you might recognize, like a very young-ish Michael Gambon is in there. And Dumbledore.
I did not notice him.
You didn't notice Dumbledore. Well, we'll get into that.
Okay.
And Kathleen Byron is a character named Dr. Rose, who I don't even remember, but she was in The Great Black Narcissus, directed by Powell and Pressburger, if you're a fan of that flick. Now, this movie, you might guess, as did I, starring Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing in the 70s would be a horror movie, because that's what I know of these guys prior to, Star Wars, and with Christopher Lee in particular, the Lord of the Rings trilogy. So that's why I got excited about this, along with this synopsis, which I will read from Amazon Prime. It says, in this horror thriller, so those two words are right there in the synopsis, Craig, a strange cult tries to achieve immortality by taking over the bodies of children in an orphanage. And I think that's a pretty accurate synopsis for like the last 5 minutes of this movie.
Yes.
The other hour and a half, not really.
Not so much. I'd also like to point out, the poster, at least the poster that I've seen, features a girl's head being torn in half as she's screaming. And the title says Nothing But the Night. And then a little tagline under that says, and the terror.
That's right.
And I'm thinking, man, this has to be a really brutal piece of cinema right here.
It looks like her head is being opened up by a drill bit.
Yes.
Yeah, and the little tagline, which is actually above the title on this poster, says, who holds the key to this intrigue of murder?
Yeah.
Now, I did a little bit of research on this, and there's a lot of reviews on this thing online. Obviously, horror fans are everywhere on the internet. And apparently this movie also was known under two different titles during the 70s and 80s. First, and apparently... this I thought was kind of comical, because this is from DVDDrivein.com. But they wrote a jury U.S. theatrical history that had the film playing in southern drive-ins during the mid-70s as the Resurrection Syndicate, which I love the title, The Resurrection Syndicate. In some ways, I think it's more appropriate.
Yeah,
but I just like the way they wrote this. It makes southern drive-in sound so bad. It's just like, that's the worst possible place your movie could play, I would imagine. And I don't know if that's true, but in the 80s it was also known as The Devil's Undead when it was released by Monterey Home Video and VHS. And so I think sometime after that it reverted to the title Nothing But the Night, which was the original title. And this also bears the distinction of being part of the Hammer horror films lineage. And again, this was all part of my excitement for picking this because, Craig, you're the horror guy. To my knowledge, I've never seen a Hammer film from this era. I have seen one recently, which I didn't even realize was a Hammer film, but I'll get to that in a second. But do you have any sort of history with this very noted production company or / studio or whatever they were? I've definitely heard of it. It's like,
yes,
if you're a film fan, I think you're aware of it, but I've never actually delved into their movies. What about you?
Well, I've delved a little bit. I mean, I haven't delved maybe as much as I should have, given how much I love horror and yes, how revered the studio is. We can thank Hammer for, I think, some of the better stuff that's come from Tim Burton, because he was a huge horror fan.
Right.
I've certainly seen the Gorgon, for instance. I've seen kind of some random ones, I guess. I don't know if I've really seen the ones that it's really, really famous for.
Right.
I keep hoping there's going to be just one big box set of Hammer films, and then I'll just buy that, and then I can just be done with it. But no, I honestly, I don't know a lot about it. I know the style of it. I know certainly from the era, the Gorgon was made in the early 60s, and so, certainly in the 60s, if you're going to sit down and watch a Hammer film, you know what it's going to look and feel like. Mm-hmm. Which honestly is a really very clean and it's a classy look. There were some classy horror films as far as I understand. But anyway, what are your feelings about Hammer films?
Basically, just kind of like you, it feels like one of those things I should have seen.
Yeah.
And there's a little bit of guilt there as far as I haven't done my duties as a film fan, even though I'm not the biggest horror guy. But also, I kind of felt like, oh, these are somewhat fringe, I guess I would say, for the time at least. Because, I think my sort of knowledge of historical horror is the Universal monster movies, the Dracula, Frankenstein, Wolfman, Mummy, that from that old black and white era. And then nothing happened until Rosemary's Baby. Which is so obviously not at all true. And so I think I was expecting, well, this kind of fills in the gap a little bit. And these guys were sort of operating, outside of America and presenting the sort of stuff that would be considered, I guess, fringe for, the Hollywood system of horror. And just, digging into it a little bit today, I mean, it's really, really interesting. It's as a company, it's been around since 1935, which is insane. But it really kind of became known as, the Hammer horror brand, if you will, was picked up kind of in 55, mid 50s and to the early 60s, Curse of the Frankenstein, or The Curse of Frankenstein, they did a Dracula, they did The Mummy, they did The Revenge of Frankenstein, The Evil of Frankenstein. There's a whole litany of sequels there through the, the 60s into the 70s. But also, reading here that with Curse of Frankenstein, they had to submit these scripts to the, BBC or some sort of, moral code assembly, of course, especially in the UK where they're very uptight and polite, as we know them. And, here's this quote I'll read from you that, they came back on the script and reported in 1956, "We are concerned about the flavor of the script, which in its preoccupation with horror and gruesome detail goes far beyond what we are accustomed to allow, even for the X category." Which I'm like, I got to see that.
Yeah.
So I think once we get done talking through this movie and maybe where it at least disappointed me by not being a lot of these things of my expectations, I'm totally going to go watch that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
and then,
that's when we're going to start our newest podcast.
Right.
Never Hammer It.
Yeah. But I will say, I think, I don't know how you have anything but goodwill towards Christopher Lee in particular.
Yes.
Just seems like such a likable guy. Anybody that worked that long and had that varied of a career is interesting to me. And I just do not know his work prior to the most recent stuff, and that's my own fault. And so, it was to me the big takeaway from this was watching those two guys in their roles, even though they weren't necessarily, heavily involved in any of the scare or any of that occult business.
Yeah.
Which we'll get into. One interesting thing I learned about Christopher Lee today, Craig.
Mm-hmm.
He hosted Saturday Night Live.
When?
In the 70s.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well,
and in fact, apparently it was his appearance there that led Steven Spielberg to cast him in 1941, which I did not realize he was in that either.
I did not realize that at all, no.
But this is also a guy who lived to be a 93, I think. So, of course, there's got to be a million of these stories. Like, we're just scratching the surface here. But yeah, I thought that was amazing. And then, of course, Peter Cushing, I think a lot of people, if you don't know him from the Hammer stuff, you'll know him from Star Wars, of course. He was Grand Moff Tarkin. My apologies to any of the nerds if I didn't pronounce that correctly in some capacity.
You know what? Every time I see Peter Cushing, I don't even think about Star Wars anymore. Yeah. I only think about that scene in Top Secret.
Oh my God, I didn't even think about that. He was
in
there, right?
Man, there's a great scene. We'll find it on YouTube maybe and put a link up. But I always expect him to turn around with a magnifying glass to his eye and then take it down. He's just got a big eye.
But yeah, he did a bunch of these movies. I mean, he was in The Legend of the Werewolf, The Ghoul. You can throw a dart at any of these and come up with an awesome title. The Creeping Flesh, The Satanic Rites of Dracula. He played Van Helsing in that movie. I think he played Van Helsing a couple times. Famously, he was in The Gorgon, Dr. Terror's House of Horrors. I mean, so he's just one of those, And I do kind of love, even though I don't love horror, I love that sort of era of it, and the Ed Wood stuff. Like, even thinking about Vincent Price and these guys who just that was it. Like, they were locked into that. That's all they had to go on. That's all that was given to them. And even thinking about me growing up and seeing Elvira, as cheesy as that is, but there's still something to me that's kind of cool and fun about it. And also just I appreciate that as a filmmaker that that's where they made their bread and butter, and they did that. They just a huge litany of films on their filmography. It's crazy.
Yes.
Do you have a favorite among the two actors?
You mean choose between these two beloved film stars?
Yeah, if you had to kill off one right now, who would you do?
Luckily,
they're both dead. Rest in peace. Yes.
Yeah, this threat against their lives won't mean much.
If you could only cast one in a Craig Moorhead horror movie, who would you go with? I
think I would go with Peter Cushing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think
that's There's interesting, but would he play would you play him as a hero or a villain?
I'd probably play him as the guy who you think is bad at first, and then he's kind of a kindly grandfather, but at the end he really is bad.
Oh, I like that twist.
Yeah.
That's what I say. I always think of Christopher Lee as being the heavier of the two, as far as
yes,
and that was kind of refreshing to see it in this movie. He's not that at all.
No,
he is not that heavy guy. So with that in mind,
neither one of them are evil.
No, exactly.
It's kind of fun.
And that became pretty clear very early on, even though I think I was still waiting for some twist of darkness.
Mm-hmm.
So with that in mind, let's get into this movie a little bit. Yeah,
let's do it.
So as we said, this is billed as a horror thriller. Oh my God. I don't know that I've ever seen a movie. And it's funny that we're talking about this after just talking about the estate of Humphrey Bogart producing a film. Mm-hmm. This movie has to do with a trust fund, basically. And so there is an older generation of people who have either contributed to or a very sort of wealthy part, or maybe by relation, involved in this trust fund, which is set up to help children. via an orphanage, I guess. Although
Something like that.
Yeah, I don't even know.
That stuff is all pretty muddy, and
So muddy.
I want to start first at the very, very beginning.
Okay. Well, yeah, I was going to say, because they're dying off. These people are dying off. That's the mystery. Why are they dying?
But even before that,
who's killing them? Okay.
And this is why I'm kind of wondering. This is one of the movies where I wonder what was the original form of this movie.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a very good question.
It feels like a story that's developed, and it feels like it has a plot. But like we open on shots of the sea and water hitting rocks with like a sexy saxophone thing happening.
It's a jazzy score. Yes,
yeah,
a very
and you're like,
jazzy score.
Okay, yeah. And then before you know it, one lady gets driven off a cliff, one guy's thrown off a balcony, a woman is shot in her face. And you're like, oh, who were they?
And
who were they and what's happening?
Yeah, the famous gloved hand. That's all you see is like a gloved hand or two.
Very sort of Italian giallo type movie type thing.
The sequence of that is macabre, and it elevates, I think, in a nice way. By the time there's a pistol right in front of a woman's cheek, an old lady's cheek, I was like, oh, holy cow, like this is pretty serious right here. But you do have also the classic with the woman in the car, and I don't even know what, like they put down the handbrake or whatever, take it into neutral, and the car rolls down the hill. Yeah. Like it immediately explodes at the first.
That lady's car was filled with gasoline.
There's no way.
And I mean, like where the seats are, it was filled.
I don't even think it flipped before it exploded. It just exploded. So that made me laugh a little bit, but then it quickly built from that. Anyway,
there is a little known thing about cars. If the tires leave the road, the car could explode.
Oh, okay.
Something to think about.
Okay, so yeah, from that you do cut to a school bus filled with children, and there's very clearly some ADR pumped in with them singing, what is sort of like the 99 bottles of beer equivalent for a grade school, and just pure chaos on like everybody is talking on that bus and jumping up and down. Yes. The adults are totally into it. You see that I didn't even pick up on the fact. Okay, yeah, there's older people on this bus, like they may be part of the same group that's just been killed off, at least generationally, right?
Right.
But we do end up sort of focusing on one girl in particular. And then, okay, I'm just going to walk you through how I saw the events unfold, okay? The bus driver was trying to light a cigarette with a lighter.
Yes.
The girl screamed. I saw a bunch of flames. And then we're in the hospital.
Yes.
Okay. Is that okay? That's how you saw it as well?
Yes. And I'm not sure if you were the same way, but it felt like, was she always in the hospital and that was a memory?
No, I don't think it was though, right? I asked myself that question. Yes.
Yeah, I don't think it was either. But yeah, there was sort of it does kind of feel like you wanted a little more information there at the end of that sequence. Like, because everything is going just fine. The bus driver looks a little annoyed. It feels like something bad is going to happen. And I can't remember exactly why. It feels like there's going to be a crash. I don't know how that's really set up, but you're exactly right. Then he tries to light a cigarette. She goes ballistic. Next thing you know, hospital.
I still cannot tell you what exactly happened to the bus.
Not sure.
Here's my various theories.
Yeah.
A, she's a fire starter. So she made the flames go higher with her mind, which I'm going to discard that. I don't think it's option A.
I don't think that's true.
B, he lit the cigarette, the cigarette, right? She screamed because of some sort of previous fear of fire.
Yes.
That distracted the bus driver. He was like, what? He drives off a cliff, as we know. Well, he probably didn't even drive off a cliff. The bus wheels went off the pavement and it exploded. Right,
as it happens.
And a lot of people, I think, died. I think some people died. I'm still a little unsure about that.
Shaky on that because it felt like somebody died, even if it was just. It couldn't have been the bus driver. It seemed like someone died, and that was another thing for the police, where it was like, oh well, now 4 trustees have died. For some reason, I feel like somebody on the bus died.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Option C, in which I'm somewhat inclined to go with, just based on what I was actually given. There was no crash. She screamed because she's afraid of fire.
Yes.
And then she went into hysterics. They put her in the hospital. And then through hypnosis, we find out, something happened in her past involving fire, and that's why she freaked out.
I thought somebody died on the bus.
I think somebody did die on the bus, but again,
But it was unrelated.
I think there was a crash, but just by the way that it's investigated. But
Yes.
as far as the information we're actually given, I'd say nobody.
Yeah.
You can't tell. You can't tell.
Right. And this is when you actually find out that this girl is an orphan.
Right.
Up until now, you have no idea there are orphans anywhere or anything. But this is, now you know orphans exist, and she's one of them.
She's little orphan Annie.
Yes.
Little orphan Mary. One thing I do like about this, it is a bit of an ensemble. And so we'll establish the major players here. The girl is in the hospital. Mm-hmm. She's being seen by a doctor, a pediatrician, I suppose, named Dr. Haynes,
yes.
I think. First name Peter.
Peter Haynes.
He goes to Peter Cushing, who works in the pathology lab at the hospital.
Sir Ashley Mark?
Yeah.
Yes.
Sir Mark Ashley is what it says.
Sir Mark Ashley, sorry. I knew I was going to... Oh,
okay. And as he goes in, Christopher Lee is already there. Christopher Lee plays Colonel Bingham. It's established, I think, that he and Peter Cushing, Sir Mark Ashley, are very good friends. Mm-hmm. And I guess he's there to find out exactly what happened to the people on the bus. And then the doctor is saying, I think this girl has got some sort of repressed memory of a traumatic event. Or she remembers what happened on the bus, but only through hypnosis.
Right.
And so he wants to do, I guess, further tests on her, but has to go to Peter Cushing for some reason. And boy, Peter Cushing is really not interested in doing any of that. He's very stubbornly closed-minded about even going and seeing this girl in the hospital in a way that I didn't quite understand why.
Yeah.
Did you feel that way?
A little bit.
Okay.
It seemed sort of there to just provide conflict.
Yeah.
Like, it didn't seem like there should be that much argument over such a thing. It's like if one of your doctors thinks a girl is in trouble or something, then maybe look into it.
Right. Go to your superior.
Yeah.
Which it felt like there's a clear rank established here, right? I get that. It's totally fine. There's resources at a hospital. I get that. But yeah, I just didn't. He just did not seem very interested in this girl's health that much.
No.
So within these moments, I think Dr. Peter kind of goes away a little bit. Mm-hmm. And then, boy, there's a lot of exposition going on in these scenes. And I think it's pretty early on here where I'm like, you know what, maybe this might not be as much of a horror movie as I expected or hoped. And it feels a lot like an old TV show or movie or like Dark Shadows or something.
A little bit,
where, it doesn't have a really clear visual style. It's just sort of basic coverage.
No.
And there's a lot of talking going on, and a lot of it is exposition.
Well, it seems, and I don't know enough about the movie to know if this is true, but it kind of feels like the movie's built around the idea that they had enough money to get Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee. So let's put them in a lot of scenes, but let's keep them in rooms. Let's
Very
just have there be talking. And
I think they do go outside once each in the movie.
That's possible. That is possible.
They're on a boat at one point.
Yes.
And then Christopher Lee's outside. Anyway. Oh, and Peter Cushing's in a helicopter at the end, so there's that.
Oh, my goodness. That's right.
Yeah,
at night. At night? Yeah.
That's where the production value went.
Yeah. Wow.
I thought both were very, very good in their respective roles and with what they were given. Particularly Christopher Lee, who I think carries the heavy load of that exposition, because he is the one, he's the investigator, he's the one suppositing theories about what happened, which is all these people were very, very rich that have been dying. I'm saying they all died within 24 hours, and the trust is valued at $5 million. Someone is killing them off to get that money.
Yeah, he is certainly driving the plot.
And saying, yes, in the process that the children were incidental on that bus, the goal was to kill the adult members of this trust.
Yes.
And I think what he's asking Peter Cushing to do is find something in the pathology of the bodies that would supply him with evidence to state, yeah, it looks like the fire was. I don't quite know.
Well, I'll say this, and you might be entirely right. I was assuming the whole point of Cushing's existence at that point is Haynes just wants permission to keep the girl there and not release her to her mother.
There's a lot of that, yeah,
or whoever. There's so I thought it was just like all they're trying to do is convince Peter Cushing that they need to keep the girl there for observation. But either way, either one is totally as plausible as the other.
Okay, well, let's talk about them because Peter also ends up pushing to have the girl's mother visit, right?
I thought that was Haynes.
Haynes, yes. Sorry, I said Peter Cushing. Yeah, Peter Haynes.
Dr. Peter Haynes, yes, wants the mother to visit, hoping that will shake something loose, I guess?
Yeah.
Okay, so question, and I'm sure this is covered. Well, it's just that she's a bad mom. Mary's not an orphan at all.
Right.
As I stated earlier, which was completely false, and I apologize to our listening audience for lying to them.
It's not the first. Won't be the last.
Yeah. Has a mom. Mom is just a terrible entertainer. Pretends to be a seer, a mystic. Honestly, a fine actress really, for what she had to do. But just a weirdo in the movie. Character was a weirdo, and so Haynes wants this weirdo to come to the hospital and shake something loose. Essentially, I think everyone else seems against it, right? But then Haynes makes it happen anyway.
Well, with the reporter, Joan Foster, played by Georgia Brown.
Oh, sweet Georgia Brown. Yeah,
Georgia Brown.
The reporter who becomes a big part of moving the plot along too, I guess.
Yeah, and you find out then that the reason Mary was turned over to the orphanage in the first place, or to the trust, was that her mother, Anna, this is one we're talking about, did 10 years for a triple homicide, I think.
Yes.
And also was a prostitute.
Yeah.
So, yeah, she became custody of somebody else for a while. And now, I do think that's an interesting question to ask as a society. Once someone has done their time for such a thing, are they then entitled to go retake custody and become a parent of their minor children?
It's interesting. How old would you say Mary is?
I would peg her at 12 or 13.
That's disgusting. Yeah, exactly. 12 or 13. So what we're saying is that in the span of 12 or 13 years, this woman was responsible for the deaths of 3 people to the point where she was convicted of murder.
Yeah.
But now she's not in prison
years.
anymore? I don't know. Like, something seems a little weird. Like, 3 people are dead. You didn't get at least 20 years in prison?
No. I know the Brits are so polite. They said 10
Maybe
years,
so.
You're out.
Maybe so.
But what's funny is she is not at all reformed.
No.
In fact, the first time we see her, like, she's going into the hospital. She's trying to see her child because I think she saw it on the news.
Yes.
That there had been this accident, right? And so, she's going in the hospital, like, saying, "I'll kill the bastards."
Yeah.
For taking her away from me. And then this poor doctor who's actually just trying to help this girl and thinks, well, it's probably within the rights of the mother to visit her child. And that's sort of, you get the idea that's a position from the reporter as well. They go to meet her, and the mom straight up says, "I will kill you."
Yeah.
To Dr. Haynes. Like, she threatens him.
Yeah.
It's if you mess this up, or if this is a trick. And he's just trying to say, "I want you to come see your daughter." She's like, "If this is a trick, I'll kill you."
Yeah, she's all about killing.
Yeah, I was like, boy, that's maybe not the best play if you're trying to, get your kid back and work your way back into regular society. I don't know.
No, indeed, but I mean, she is certainly a very impulsive person throughout. The movie.
Yep, for sure.
And she's not one to be deterred, it seems. But yeah,
no.
So she goes to visit.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we see it through Cushing's eyes. Maybe Cushing and Lee go up there.
Yeah, it doesn't go well.
No, and there's just this. It's just pandemonium. And then they go back in the room where Mary was, and we discover how badly it went. Because there is poor Dr. Peter Haynes with, like, a hat pin shoved in his temple?
Yeah. I totally didn't know what I was like. Oh, man, he just got stabbed with some sort of weird star-shaped thing. Yeah, it was a hat pin.
And I think at this point we're about halfway through the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And our doctor is murdered this way. And I will say this, too. You were saying earlier, not to put this on your do not see list. Even for all sort of the confusing nature of it and everything, and we're saying that we have Cushing and Lee sitting around talking a lot, I have to say the movie moves really fast. Fast enough that it's easy to kind of lose your place where you're like, wait, did I need more there? It's not something that really dwells and, it's not boring, I guess is what I should say.
But I do think what you're describing took me out of it a little bit. Yeah, because I do feel like I was trying to keep up with things a little bit and failing in many regards.
Whatever the setup that has been given to us to set us up for how everything's going to play out at the end, that setup is terrible. Like, all of that is just so muddy. You're just like, okay,
yeah, it really is.
Trustees are being killed, but how would any of this? Why would the doctor get a hat pin in his face then? It's just like, I don't understand why any of this is happening.
Well, and you're not quite sure who to really follow for a lot of this. We're talking about the midpoint of the movie, and a lot of what's happened prior to this is just this reporter trying to get the right to bring the mom to the hospital, and then there's some give and take with that, and she clearly has some feelings for Dr. Haynes and a little bit vice versa.
Yes.
And so it's almost like it wouldn't be out of place on a medical drama show.
Sure.
Like an hour. Like some of that stuff is just, okay, well, on this week, you're slowly pushing the story forward, and then you start with a big event, and the episode will end with a big event. But, in the middle there's just a lot of talking and walking. And there's just, I don't know that there's really anything that's imperative to know or understand until that murder happens, and Mary's mother goes on the lam, and then they move Mary out of the hospital, I think, with the trust with the old people. Mm-hmm. And I got a little bit confused about where they went. I think they went to an island, or like the Scottish Moors or something.
Well, I just assumed this is where they normally were.
Okay, right.
They do go to Scotland, yeah. They're definitely in Scotland, yeah.
Because like a car, like Mary's mother's car shows up on a transport ferry. And
right. They're trying to keep Mary's mom from getting to her, right?
Yes.
Because they think she's the one who's trying to murder everybody.
Yeah. Even though they did just let her walk out of the hospital.
Yeah.
I guess they didn't know that Dr. Haynes had been murdered when she walked out, I guess.
Yes, somehow, yeah.
Yeah. That said, it does sort of become a manhunt for her under the guise of protecting this child.
Yes.
And they think, I don't know, I guess the assumption is, well, she's going to murder Mary, or she's going to take Mary away, or murder whoever she has to get to her. Which I guess that's enough of a, you could build thrills around that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know necessarily that they do, but I checked out a little bit in that second half. I for sure will say, just trying to keep up with some of that, and it introduces so many different new characters, like even just like guys walking in the woods, and then like I said, like the dude on the ferry boat, and then the cop that's there, and then Michael Gambon's character, who you didn't even notice, is there when Colonel Bingham becomes, there was something about like him being reinstated as a constable, or I don't know. Like I didn't follow all that sort of like hierarchy of the British police force.
Well, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Okay, so Mary's mother, right? She sneaks onto the island. She gets past the cops. She's in the woods. You don't know exactly what her motivations are. The movie certainly doesn't want you to know. My question for you is, are you worried about what she's going to do? Is there ever a point where you're like, she might be the one who's killing everyone?
No. I didn't feel that, I didn't, I mean, she's so, she felt crazy to me, like, and unhinged, but not, like, she's not like a stalking murderer, like, or a serial killer or anything like that.
Yes, she doesn't seem like a plotter.
No, and I also, I don't quite know, other than just the simple, basic parental desire to have your child, which I get. Which doesn't seem like she's living the life where she is really missing out having a kid around,
Right.
Like that's going to fill some void.
Yeah.
Or she's dying to live a, parental life with her child or anything like that. So I wasn't quite sure, like, does she just really, really want her kid back? It doesn't quite feel like it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, for me, the big thing was, it kind of pulled me back into the movie, was you've got Christopher Lee and Cushing and various reporters, I think, including the journalist Joan, on another ferry, and they're heading across the water, and I think it was Christopher Lee, or it might have been, I don't think it was Gambon. It might have been somebody else. Anyway, they were like, look, there's another boat coming. That's the, what the hell was that trust called anyway? It was such a good name. Van Tralen Trust or something.
Yeah, Van Tralen.
Oh, that's the Van Tralen boat. Look at that. They spent all them. And then boom, it just blows up in the middle of the water. And I didn't see that coming. And I was like, oh, holy shit. That just, whoa, okay. I'm back into this movie a little bit. And then it's not long at all after that I think the dudes in the woods find the little boy that's been missing. And he's been stabbed 32 times.
Yeah.
And so at that point, for sure, I'm like, this is not the mom. There's no way. Even if she killed that doctor, which you kind of know she didn't, she's not going to kill this other kid like that.
Right.
I don't think she has that. Even though she did kill 3 people, I don't think she's going after that kid.
Right. She doesn't seem like the one. And let me ask you about this kid. When they find that kid stabbed that many times, was there anything... Did that clarify anything for you?
No, and it was even more confusing because there was like a star carved onto his head, right?
Yes.
And so I was like, okay, is that some sort of weird connection to the hat pin thing? Maybe this is... I
didn't think about that.
Like,
That'd be true, yeah.
Well, I was like, maybe there's something more sinister going on, expecting from the synopsis that there's a cult involvement somewhere here. I'm like, okay, there's something on this island that's not right. We're finally about to get to that moment, Yes. And then we do, and then it's over.
Yeah.
That's the reason to watch this thing, I think.
Yeah. I mean, those last minutes, so Christopher Lee goes to the mansion where they're having a big bonfire. They've decided that the kids are in such danger that he has to just bust onto the premises and go save these kids.
I think so.
And I think just as he's getting there, he sees they have this this sort of effigy up on a pole, dressed sort of like a clown.
Yeah, it was a little weird to make out, but I think that's a good description.
Yeah, with odd things on its fingers, and then
like a wooden mask,
right?
Like a painted mask over its face,
right? The kids are dancing around and saying some kind of nursery rhyme.
And dressed as adults.
And it sounds very sinister. And they start saying, I think they start saying, cut the rope or something.
Yeah.
And they cut the rope, which then sends the effigy down into the fire. But before it goes down, the mask comes off, and it's Mary's mom, as far as I can tell. She's still alive, I think.
Yep.
And she goes face first right into that fire, and she's burning. Before you know it, you got Mary explaining the entire plot to us, because otherwise we'd be completely lost. But she is actually Mary is actually the vessel for someone Van Tralen's soul. A woman
Helen,
who
I think
Helen
was her
Van
name,
Tralen's
right?
soul. And so are all these other kids. That's what they're all earmarked for, is just to be new bodies for these old people, which is an interesting idea.
Not unlike being John Malkovich a little bit,
Yeah.
I thought of.
Yeah, it's kind of like more of a horror take on being John Malkovich.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing for me is if you start there and you say these kids are all vessels for these certain old people, and then you go backwards through the movie, I feel like it makes even less sense.
I don't think it will hold up at all.
Yeah, I don't.
No way.
I don't know why a kid was stabbed 32 times.
Yeah.
I mean, is the idea that the people who died at the beginning, their souls went into the kids?
I think so.
Okay.
I do. There's, and I don't remember the exact chain of events, but at some point there's a separate scene with Peter Cushing and I don't even remember who else. Maybe the reporter lady. There's something that he's become convinced of what is actually happening, and I don't even remember who kind of like even planted the seed of this idea.
Right.
But they talk about like memory being transferred from the trustees to the children.
Yes.
And so that's kind of like why in the opening, all those old people, when they're killed, seem very comatose. You know, that lady in the car is just sitting there dead-faced, right?
So they've been transferred and they're just
I
bodies
think,
now.
yes. I think that's just a
idea.
shell of a person at that point.
Yeah.
And that's been transferred to a child, I guess. How this takes place,
Yeah.
I don't know. And I don't even remember them saying.
No.
I mean, maybe it's like they use the sort of catch-all of, well, it's a ritualistic thing. You know?
Right.
It's like,
Those
and so
crazy
maybe,
occults. Yeah.
right. I wondered, okay, is that what's happening with Mary's mom? Is she being, but that's not what was happening with Mary's mom. I think she does, because I went back and watched that ending again, just for the pure enjoyment of it, because it's so insane. Like, okay, yeah. So they burn her. And then, Christopher Plummer is like trying to stop this from happening. And then they attack Christopher Plummer, different, awesome Christopher.
Yes.
Christopher Lee. The kids turn on Christopher Lee. Mary's obviously, she's the Malachi. She's the ringleader here. Mm-hmm. They get him, tie him up in rope. They put the rope around his neck several times and then are pulling him by the limbs towards the fire. And she wants to burn him.
Yeah.
And she does say in those moments, when I went back and watched it twice, that, what did she say here? She basically said that her mother had started to figure it out, I think. Or no, I'm sorry. Dr. Haynes had started to figure out what was going on. That what she was talking about in those sort of moments of hypnosis, she was describing something that Helen Van Tralen went through, right?
Right.
Okay. Which is all, okay, that's whatever. That's kind of interesting. Still doesn't explain how she got there.
Right.
Right. And so that's why the doctor had to be killed. The little boy was going to mess it up. Like, he didn't want to join them or be a part of it, which, God forbid, a little boy wouldn't want some old person being in their body. Yeah. So they had to kill him. I think she said, and here it is. Okay. She said something about getting her revenge against her mother, which doesn't make sense if she's Helen Van Tralen. What does she care about Anna Harb, like this girl's mom? Like, there's nothing personal there that I can tell. So I didn't quite understand that. But then the best part of this whole movie is...
Yeah, it does really ramp up here at the end.
Oh, man, yeah. The girl is standing there, Mary, and, they're pulling Christopher Lee towards the fire. You see the helicopter come by because Peter Cushing has figured out that these kids are not kids, right? Like, he believes it now from whatever the hell happened.
Right.
And something causes the flames to swell, or she steps in the wrong place. It's as confusing to me, and I watched it twice, as the bus, the scene with the bus. She ends up catching on fire, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is she completely on fire, engulfed in flames? No. Granted, if you catch any of you on fire, it's going to hurt. Does she
Sure.
stop, drop, and roll? No.
What is it? Just sort of
She's-
like her arm is on fire? Like what? Her
Well,
sleeve?
yeah, and like in one shot, it doesn't even look like any of her is on fire. And then
Yeah.
from a distance, you see. Well, what was amazing about it is like I think before I realized she's on fire, she's screaming. So you get the idea. Okay, she's probably burning, right? But you don't see where she's on fire. And she says, I wrote it down. She screams at Christopher Lee, "You destroyed my dreams. I curse your cruel God." Then she walks away from the fire rapidly, and you see it's like, yeah, it looks like her hands are on fire, which is bad, right?
Right.
But she walks to a cliff and jumps off the cliff, presumably to her death down below.
Mm-hmm.
And then all the other kids silently turn. They walk over to the cliff in their adult clothes, and then they one by one jump off into
Yeah.
their death. And that's the end.
That is a stark ending. It ties right into the beginning with the waves and the saxophone, which I was convinced would never come back because it just looked like stock
You had to
photography.
reprise that.
No one was in.
It
I
was
was just
amazing.
like, yeah, this we'll never see this again. But it did.
You did.
It sure did. And I mean, and then that we dwell on that for the rest of the credits. I mean, we're just flying around in circles looking at the water where all these kids jumped in and died, all filled with old people.
Yeah. And why would they do that?
Why? Why? Even if she did it, why would they do it?
Makes no sense to me.
I could come up with an idea if I was still writing the script and say, well, if she's dead, she's the only one who knows how to keep this process going or something. And if she's dead, our lives are going to be a living nightmare. So we're out of here.
Right.
But that's not really. I just made that up.
Right.
But you know, I mean that's really the shame of it is that you know
Yeah.
you had these two great actors and I like scary kids are always creepy and I kind of felt like the way this one ended up was not something I had necessarily seen exactly like it before.
No, and I will remember that for a long time.
Yeah,
I think.
absolutely.
Like it is startling imagery, and like the way it's played is really cool and creepy. And
Yeah.
it's a shame, yes, that is the only remotely creepy thing of this movie.
Yeah.
And it raises so many more questions than it provides any sort of like satisfactory resolution.
Yeah. Like
I
if-
would much.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well,
I would say if it started there,
Yeah.
is that what you're gonna say?
No. But go ahead.
I mean, if you just had like, if you open a movie with these kids jumping off a cliff,
Yeah.
the way that they shot this, yeah, I want. What the hell happened? I want to know. Like, you go investigate that.
Or
Like,
yeah,
that to me
or
is
yeah,
crazy.
exactly. Like or you know, instead of the trustees dying at the beginning, even if it's not like I know,
God.
even if it's not
Yeah.
like the rest of the movie's in flashback, you can just start off the movie with a bunch of kids jumping off a cliff, and you're like, what the fuck? And it's just because this group of kids was kind of doing what the group of kids we're about to follow are doing, you know, and you'll realize why they jumped off a cliff at the end. But yeah, I don't know. It seems like there's really fertile ground there for something a lot creepier, a lot more of a puzzle box of a movie where you can really, because it feels like it really wants you to kind of switch your suspicions throughout, but it kind of does it in a really scattershot way.
Well, it doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't provide you really any scapegoat other than Mary's mom,
Right.
And like we said, it's just that's not a satisfactory scapegoat. I don't think.
No, and it's not like it. Yeah, it doesn't really point hard enough at it. It doesn't.
No.
It doesn't do it in a way where you would actually, reasonably believe that she would be the person doing all these things.
Yeah.
You know, much better if you had a movie set up where, almost everyone you meet. I kind of think about the way Scream did stuff. The movie Scream, which I always thought was kind of cool, with a very light touch. I felt like it felt like the first 10 scenes of that movie, every single person you met was like, that person could be the killer.
Yeah. Oh,
Every
totally.
single
That's what they
one.
wanted you to think. Yeah.
And it was fun, and it was a little more underlined than just like, well, let's make everybody think it's the loony.
No, and I mean, especially, we keep saying again and again, you got these two actors. Point the finger at them. I mean, for 1 second, and they never do.
I mean, they're
Never,
both
ever,
kind
ever.
of creepy in their own ways.
Sure.
Like, you don't know anything about them, and both of them could just look at the camera and creep everybody out. So
Yeah, actually, I thought Christopher Lee, I mean, I thought he was so good just like as like, yeah, like this mild-mannered kind of straightforward guy trying to do a job here. And I thought like his shock in that last scene was appropriate and like significant and believable and all that stuff. And I mean, that really helped the scene, I think, in a lot of ways.
Well, and that reminds me, have you seen The Wicker Man?
I never have.
Okay.
I know.
Because what's really interesting is there are very real echoes.
I wondered about that.
At the end. You should check out Wicker Man, because like the ending, you'll be
it's
like, wow, this is like, it's like this, you know, it's like nothing but the night is looking in a mirror, basically.
Right. I've seen bits of the remake, but yeah, obviously that's for a different day.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, I think it was an interesting experience. It strikes me as one of these movies that there's a lot of interesting ideas that just never gelled and were never kind of executed in a way to make them really stand on their own. And also one that, you know, maybe it would be worth checking out the novel at some point. Like maybe that's a more entertaining read and they can actually get into psychology a little bit and some of the X's and O's of how the hell old people get into young people's body in a way that is somewhat sensible, or at least for science fiction. So, yeah, that said, I don't know any other takeaways from this thing. I don't know that I would recommend this necessarily, except for that last scene, which I would love to see if we can just find on YouTube, and we'll post that. I don't care. Like, it's not going to spoil anything, obviously. No. So you got to see that.
Well, it would be a very specific recommendation for sure.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And I don't think this thing has terrible reviews all over the place. I mean, I think it's, you know, there's people that like it. One thing that's very interesting is I correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is the exact same year that The Exorcist came out.
I think 73.
So. Yeah. And so by comparison, I mean, just wow, what a night and day different, you know, kind of thing here, even though you're dealing with kids who... And I also thought about like the whole satanic panic, like Michelle Remembers thing, where, you know, there was this whole era of like trying to get kids to recall things that had happened to them via hypnosis or via even just, you know, the awful, you know, interrogations by psychiatrists and things that warranted and yielded horrible false accusations against people in a lot of real instances. But I don't know if like this was part of a wave of early using kids to scare people, or at least, you know, heighten dread in horror movies, which is, like you say, I mean, scary kids is always effective in a lot of ways.
Really, yeah. Usually it works.
And I thought the girl was good in this.
She was.
So the girl that played Mary was pretty good.
They had a good kid actor. Like, they had all the ingredients.
And she was pretty damn evil in that last scene.
Yeah, she pulled
pearls on and everything.
Yeah.
she looks ridiculous, but like, yeah, the way she did, I mean, that last little couple lines, which I curse your cruel God, which I don't even know what she's talking about.
Nope.
With the way she said it, I was like, oh, this is awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you do want to check it out, it is on Amazon Prime. And I think they've got, you know, several other horror movies from, I think, Hammer, if not at least from this era and stuff. And man, I was hoping I could find one that would stump you and also impress you, but I think we'll try again sometime.
I can never be impressed.
Craig, as always, it was fun.
Yes.
Thank you,
Shawn,
for all your info.
This episode in particular, I feel, was life-changing. And I owe it all to you. Yeah.
Really? Mm-hmm. You're not going to go, like, seek out some old person and try to, like, swap bodies with them or something, are you?
Oh, no, No, not life-changing like that. Just, like, life-changing like...
Just...
I don't know. Like, whenever you find, like, a new cereal that tastes good.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. That's how I praise then.
Just
I know how much you like your cereals.
Yeah, different levels.
Seinfeld.
Yeah.
No, that's fine. As always, you can find us online at neverheardpodcast.com, and that has links to all your social media needs. Mm-hmm. Come say hello wherever you want to. We like getting messages.
We do. We treasure them.
All right. Until next time, please go watch some movies and pay your respects to Christopher Lee.
Yeah,
All right?
really.
Jesus.
And Cushing.
And Cushing, too.
Okay. Good night.